Hey, welcome back to Mr. B's. We're here on actually it's going to be a Monday evening by the time this thing rolls around.
Different day.
Yeah, we kind of mixed it up right now. Last week was a busy one for Tim and me. But we're here at Mr. B's, 1995 Northwest 86th Street in beautiful Clive, Iowa. He's Tim Sitzman. I'm Chris Williams.
I am.
Tim, we got to talk about the conference realignment. That's the only thing going on right now.
Boy, there's a lot of conversation out there, Chris, and I'm reading the papers and listening to all this, and I know as little as everybody else out there. We're all thinking we know, but it could be a big deal. What do you think? What's your shot at?
Well, you know, I'll give it to you. I'm going to lay it all out right now, and I'm going to ask you the same deal.
Absolutely.
There's the argument out there that the Mountain West or any mid-major conference or whatever might actually be better for Iowa State. I go against that, basically because Iowa State has been a major university for a century.
Yes.
Long
time.
Yeah, and I think that this is my fear. I don't know. This is kind of the question I'm posing with this thing today, but my fear is, in basketball season, specifically basketball, because football is a whole different monster. Football is an event. It's not a game.
It is a day event.
Yeah. Basketball, though, over the years, you look at if a mid-major opponent is playing at Iowa State, and you look at the crowd compared to when a Big 12 opponent is playing at Iowa State. What concerns me is if, in the middle of the year, your biggest conference game is against TCU.
Right.
Or it's against BYU.
Right.
Would the
fans
Hilton Magic be there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
it's not like playing Kansas, who's #1 in America.
Exactly, because you always have those spike games where Hilton's going to be sold out. And then football, I think the fans, I don't see much of a drop-off in football. I don't see something like that. But that really concerns me. Football-wise, what concerns me the most is recruiting. If all of a sudden you're not playing in a league with Texas and Texas A&M, are you going to be able to pull those recruits out of like Metro Dallas and stuff? Is Iowa State as appealing if they're not in the Big 12, which is dominated by Texas? That concerns me. I'll ask you, Cyclone fan Tim, would you still be as interested in the game?
I could come. I'm going to come as a devil's advocate. I'm going to come at it as a different angle here. I look at that Mountain West Conference of having some pretty darn good football teams.
You're right.
We saw Boise State. We saw BYU play some of the big names in college football and be very competitive, and in fact sometimes win that ball game. I think in Iowa State situation, all of what you said is very true, and I can understand that side of it. I sound like I'm riding the fence, guys, but I'm not. I can see the BYU game, even in basketball with Iowa State, if it's for the conference title, becoming exciting after 4 or 5 years of getting used to being in a new conference.
Okay.
I think we're seeing some transition here that we're in uncharted territories. We're in territories that nobody wants. I love the Big 12. I think the Big 12 has been, even when it was the Big 8, was a wonderful conference. But it changed to the Big 12 when we liked it, and it's going to change again, and change is part of life. I can see Iowa State becoming quite competitive in some of these things, and even those what we'd call the second tier of conferences, becoming a very good competitive game that maybe in Ames, Iowa could still be a good drawing card. Now, there's arguments both ways, and I understand that. But I guess bottom line is I want what's best for the student-athlete. I want him to be able to get an education. This is personal, that he comes out of there. I don't know what the statistics are, Chris, but I don't know how many make it in the NFL.
Not many.
Not very many first-round draft choices from Iowa State lately.
Just a speck.
And so I would like to see a competitive kind of football that fills the stadium, that creates some excitement, and certainly the Big 12 does that. And I'm not saying right here, I don't want everybody to go on record that I want this Big 12 conference to go beside it, to diminish.
Yeah.
I think we need to have the Big 12 conference, but I think there's life after the Big 12 conference.
I like your input, and I think that's the safe one for fans to ride right now because we really have no clue.
We really don't. And the big deal is the Big Ten started all this with the big networks, and it's all a money game out there, and you and I talk about that. And I think Iowa State's budget is probably one of the lowest in the Big 12 today. They're
the second lowest, I believe.
Right.
Ahead of
so
Baylor.
What I'm saying is that we can maintain that budget and be in a conference that maybe is not quite as competitive as far as who they recruit, and we could stay in our same realm of situations with the money. we might be very competitive and find ourselves playing against some of these big foes and being in a situation where we can win some of those things. So that's my take on it.
And let's be honest too. When's the last time Iowa State's been in national title conversation in football? They never have.
It's been a long time, and it may be a long time coming, even though we're seeing some really good signs up there.
And that's I guess that kind of comes to, if I'm going to support the opinion you just laid out, and one that I've seen a lot. You know, maybe this is my problem with it though. If we get into all these power conferences, and if you're left out of one, there's a really good chance that at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, it doesn't matter. It's just like you've seen with Boise State. It doesn't matter. You could be undefeated. It doesn't matter. But I guess the realist in me comes back to the fact that, you know what?
Maybe it doesn't matter now.
I don't know if it matters right now for Iowa State.
You know, and I think a lot of this is just being bruised. I mean, to be in a conference where if they all break up, nobody's even considering where you go.
Nobody cares, and that stinks.
That really stinks, and it really hurts as far as being a fan and a fan base that's saying, hey, we've been in the Big 12 conference for eons, and now they don't even really care if the thing. They aren't even asking the opinions. You know, they're letting the athletic director Jamie know what's going on. But and I'm not being negative to fans out there. I'm just being realistic.
What stinks is for an Iowa State fan. You know, we've heard the talk for a dozen years now about how Texas rules the world, and and it's true.
I read that this morning again,
and that's been frustrating as a fan. And then it's kind of like you think back to the Big 8 days where that was Nebraska,
right?
And really, at the end of the day, the future of Iowa State athletics, it's controlled by Nebraska and Texas, and that is it's disheartening to me as a Cyclone.
Right.
That's disheartening to me. And it goes beyond that to Notre Dame as well. But I think just not controlling your own destiny really hurts a lot of people out there.
And not to belabor this, and we're talking about the Big 12, but if you'd break away for a minute and go down and look at the Southeast Conference, which if you'd look at football, maybe not so much basketball, but certainly becoming basketball as a real power conference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's what we see the Big Ten, the Pac-10 trying to become is very competitive.
They want to win titles.
They want to win titles, and we see Florida dominating and Texas dominating. You know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 teams that are just LSU in the Southeast Conference. Tennessee's been a hot program over the years. So I think if you break down the Big 12 and the Big 10, you have the 2 or 3 top tier, and then there's also rants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously there's been a Missouri and there's been a Kansas State and there's been, you know, a nice sign of the Cyclones this year, but in bottom line, the same happens in the Big Ten. Nobody cares.
No.
It's 2 or 3 people. That's what you were talking about. And
it stinks.
It does stink. And I think they're saying, hey, let's be in. We just talked about it off camera. There may be 3 or 4 power conferences in the United States, and then everybody else underneath what we'd call a second tier. And I still think they can be competitive sports and very fun for fans to see, and winning conferences and playoffs and those kinds of situations that really make it fun to go to athletic events. And I don't want to see the Big 12 conference break up. I think it's inevitable that things are going to happen.
Yeah.
How they happen, I haven't a clue.
Well, it's going to be an active week.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very active week. Tim and I are going to be back tomorrow morning, and we're going to break down what Phil Steele calls the toughest non-conference football schedule.
And what a conference.
Or not the toughest non-conference, the toughest schedule in America next year.
Right.
Tim, before we do that, you got anything going on at
hey,
the store?
You know
Big
what?
sale coming up.
You know what? Big sale coming up at the end of June for our semi-annual, twice-a-year sale. But before that, it's Father's Day. We got a lot of great gifts for your dad out there and for your husband. So come in and see us at 1995 Northwest 86th Street in beautiful Clive, Iowa. And it's always fun to have Chris here. He's smiling better now that he's a married man. And he's a happy guy. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, but we'll be back again tomorrow morning. We'll be breaking down that Cyclone football schedule. For Tim Sitzman, I'm Chris Williams.